Good morning, everyone. So as Molly introduced me there, I'm Sustainability Manager at National Museums NI. And my presentation is focused on the Ulster Folk Museum, but it also deals with the whole corporate body, National Museums NI. So as we comprise 4 museums in our portfolio, and hopefully give you a flavour of the organisation and sustainability initiatives we've been undertaking. Okay, so who are we? Well, the Ulster Museum is the oldest museum in our portfolio. So the Ulster Museum dates back to the late 1800s and was established to people in Northern Ireland to enjoy in perpetuity. So it's our only museum that is not charged for, so it's free entry. So that's challenges in itself. So there we go, that's the Perusing, which was our first piece of Renaissance art. We acquired relatively recently, so that's in utility. We've got the Ulster Folk Museum, which is what the presentation is going to be focused on. So the Ulster Folk Museum is set in the late 1800s to the turn of the 20th century, telling the folk life of Ulster. We've got the Ulster Transport Museum. It's got the largest road and rail collection in the island of Ireland. And we have a small maritime collection, but most of the maritime collection is actually in storage because we haven't got the facilities to show it. And of course, we've got connections to the Titanic. I've got a Titanic exhibition in the Ulster Transport Museum, which tells the story of White Star Line and simply the Titanic. I've got some artifacts from Hardenwood as well. The Ulster Folk and Transport Museums house the Hardenwood ship collection. So we acquired the Hardenwood ship collection a number of years ago. What is all indexed is on catalogue. It took quite a considerable period of time to do that. But we've got something like 200,000 ship plans from all the Hardenwood ships. And a number of years ago, the Canadian Coast Guard approached us to a ship in Prince William Sound, and they didn't know what it was, and they weren't sure where the fuel tanks and everything were, so we were able to submit plans to them, and then they're able to send divers to the appropriate places. And the Ulster American Folk Park is tells the story of immigration from Ireland to America, and we've got one historic cottage there, the rest are relocated cottages. So we've got Ireland on one side, and then we've got America on the other side. So we travel from the old world to the new world through a ship gallery. But the ship gallery hasn't been revised for a number of years, and there's approaching its 50th anniversary. So next year maybe we will be doing a revamp, and we've got some money from the Southwest Bay Flat on the City Deals. And that's the Bluegrass Festival of Ulster American Folk Park. And the Bluegrass Festival is an annual festival, which is quite a big revenue generator for the museum. That brings challenges for sustainability as well in terms of the waste, energy and stuff. We're looking at it, but it's going to be a big long-term project to make it greener. Okay, and there's our locations of our sites. So primarily, most of our sites are located around the Belfast area, and with Ulster American Folk Park in the Western Province. So that creates challenges as well in trying to manage sustainability because it's not possible to get to all the sites all the time. We try to do the best we can. Okay. So, what's our journey so far? So we were the first public sector body in Northern Ireland to undertake a carbon baseline audit. So we got some money from the Strategic Investment Board, and the Strategic Investment Board is a FANGO which embeds expertise in the public sector. So major capital projects. So if there's a new railway line, if there's a new motorway, if there's a new dual carriageway, football stadiums, that type of thing. Though football stadiums is not a good thing in Northern Ireland because it's dragged on so long. There's a particular project, Gisborne Park. It's been in planning for a long time and nobody can make their minds about it. But they gave us £35,000 to do a carbon baseline audit. That's what it cost. They came in, looked at our sites, looked at what we're doing, and they gave us a calculator to determine the carbon. So quite detailed, and they give us a plan to reach net zero by 2030 and by 2050. So that's quite detailed, and it's a roadmap, and that's how my role came about. So our baseline year was 2018-19, so it was just prior to COVID, and that established that for scope 1 and 2, it was about 2,000 tonnes of CO2. So we measured in terms of CO2 equivalent. So we've got various things like you've got air con gases for leaks, you've got vehicles, you've got wood, you've got coal, you've got pigs, so all that comes together, but it's all expressed in terms of carbon. And scope 1 is basically the direct combustion of materials, so it's like your solid fuels, so it's your coal, it's your wood, it's your petrol, it's your diesel. Scope 2 is electricity, and then scope 3 is everything else. So within Scope 3, there's about 15 categories. We report on a number of those categories, so things like exhibits. So we work out, we have an exhibit, so something like Caravaggio with so many kilos, came in HGV from London, came in the ferry across, and then we work out the mileage and the weight, and then we get a carbon value for that. The biggest amount of our emissions comes from visitors, for us an estimate. So that's Scope 3. So the visitors primarily come by car to our sites because public transport isn't that fantastic in Northern Ireland. But in Ulster public transport museums, we're looking up there's a rail halt in the middle of the site. But it is relatively expensive to come, and we find maybe 5% staff or 5% visitors come by rail. So we're trying to see if we can try and change that. Yeah, so our Scope 3, that's where the bulk of our emissions are, but the Scope 3 is outside our control and influence. So the Scope 1 and 2, that's our operational emissions. The Scope 3 is everything from purchasing. The difficulty is with the museum, the purchasing is so vast. So we've everything from working for an Ulster Folk Museum, to animal feeds, with veterinary products by animals, and then the other extreme we have our Renoir. So it's how do you count that in your Scope 3 emissions and add value to it. So a lot of Scope 3 is estimate and assumption. The Scope 1 and 2 is measured because you can get litres of fuel, you can get kilowatts of electricity, meters cubed of gas, etc. In the baseline audit, there's 24 recommendations to achieve net zero by 2030. So 2030, we want to get to 50% of our baseline. So that's to get us about 1,000 tonnes of CO2, and by 2050 to eliminate most or not all of those emissions. So that's quite a challenge. And that comes at a cost. So those recommendations were costing at 0.92 million. And it wasn't quite a bag of a cigarette packet, but not far off, maybe some spreadsheet or something like that. But it was things like installation, maybe a new children's Ulster museum more efficient because with museums, like already high-back systems. So that requires a lot of energy, and the systems need to be maintained and be connected very quickly, and aren't necessarily the most efficient. There's things like solar panels. So at the moment we are going to a feasibility study, and we're going to tender for that, try to see which of our estate is suitable for solar panels. So with Ulster Museum, that's the biggest challenge, more or less ruled it out because it's a Grade B1 listed building in a conservation area, and then there's Ulster planning as well. And also if we start building through the roof to put solar panels on, then the prices aren't working, it will be effective heavy rainfall. So there's things like that as well. For other sites, we've got plenty of land around sites. Ulster Museum is on a very small footprint within the Botanic Gardens Belfast, so we don't own the land the museum's on. It's on a lease from the City Council for something like 900 years or 9,000 years, quite a long lease. Our current Scope 1 and 2 is about 1,600 tonnes of CO2, so that's for 23-24. So we've measured in terms of financial year, and that gives us, we try and set targets. So our target is roughly to achieve 100 tonnes of CO2 for Scope 1 and 2 each year, and that's been challenging. It's been up and down. So we've been doing it for 4 years now. Last year we shaved off 500 tonnes of CO2, but that was mainly because our plant in the offsite stores wasn't operating for 6 months, so the high-back systems weren't operating. But I'm trying to turn that around to creators and say, well, was there any impact on the collection? Did anything suffer as a result? Can we do things better? So we have an energy group trying to look to see how we can reduce our emissions. So DESO has been fairly well established for quite a number of years, but the parameters are quite broad on. So 45% community, 65% community, and that basically applies to everything. Whereas maybe it might be more effective if there was a lower community for something like textiles, for parchment, for paper, and then one for metals. So we're trying to see if we can zone it better in the stores and the galleries. Last year, the visitors accounted for 34% of raw emissions. In prior years, the first year, 18-19, we estimated the emissions from visitors about 45%. So that's been going down, but we're not really quite sure. The visitor numbers seem to be increasing, but the visitor numbers are estimated, visitor emissions are estimated on a survey. So we do surveys, exit surveys on visitors leaving the sites, and the visitors, there's 400 surveys per site, so we get 1,600 surveys back. We know the actual visitor numbers, and then we sort of multiply it up and estimate it from that. So a lot of museums are struggling with Scope 3 emissions for visitors because some of them don't want to do it. But we think we have moral duty because we're sort of a marketing museum, we're running events, we're trying to bring people in, so we should be measuring those emissions. And that shows, so the bulk of the emissions are in scope 3, with some in scope 1 and 2. So, but scope 1 and 2 is primarily what we're focusing on because we've got operational control of those. Others is very variable for many reasons and reasons that we don't necessarily understand. But we can understand the electricity going down because maybe it's becoming more efficient, or using less fuel, or maybe managing our fleet better, and things like that. Okay, so coming up, the Assembly developed the Climate Change Act in 2022. So that was a result of there was a private member's bill went through the Assembly, and then the Minister for the Department of Agriculture and Environmental Rural Affairs, he put in a parallel bill. So we actually got a better Climate Act as a result of that because the two merged, and it was a really good piece of legislation. And part of that is we were required to report through the era by the end of the year. So this year we were required to report mitigation, which will include other emissions. And then later on, this time next year, we'll report on adaptation. But adaptation is how you're dealing with climate change. So it's in terms of risk. So we're not quite sure how we're going to do that. But at present, we have got students at Queen's University working on masters, and they're looking at adaptation. So they're looking at Office data, they're looking at our risk register, various things, and they're trying to pull something together that we can maybe plan some sort of strategy. But I think adaptation is more reactive, where mitigation is putting in things like your solar panels, putting in wind turbines. Though there isn't going to be a wind turbine in Ulster Museum, but there might be solar panels. Yes, that's a challenge. But the mitigation is going to be a 3-year reporting cycle, and adaptation will be a 5-year reporting cycle. And these will be done with templates. So because we've been doing this for 4 years, I think we're in a relatively good position to do it. It will require a lot of extra work. But I know that other organisations who are specified, some like 40 public sector bodies are specified in the regulations. And some of them are struggling, they haven't done it before, and it's going to be a steep learning curve for them. And before I left last week, I had a call from someone who was trying to offer services, and they said they'd offer to the fire brigade and the police service. I said, no, we're sorted, we've got full-time to do it. So last year, when I was doing this, I started to measure the amount of time required to do it. So to get the figures together was about 100 hours work. So it was quite a considerable resource required to do it. Lots of spreadsheets, lots of data, but it's, if you know where to go with the data, it's relatively straightforward. Not too much bother. Okay. So why are we doing all this? So this is from Ed Hobbins, who's just down the road here in Reading, and he's developed the climate stripes. So you can see from pre-industrial times to now, you can see that there's a trend where it's going from cold to warmer. So atmosphere temperatures are heating up. So you can generate this from most towns, cities across the world, or countries. And what you can see from the sort of 1990s to the 2000s, with there's a lot more warming of climate change, and that's impacts. But the climate scientists don't really understand what's happening. So what the carbon is going up today has impacts maybe 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. There's a lot moving, and if you look at some of the stuff that's coming out from meteorologists, it's very dynamic, and there's new data coming out all the time, new research and new things. So yeah, so very interesting. That's why we're doing it, because it's definitely occurring, and we need to try and do something about it. It may not be effective, but we should have more of a duty to do something to try and okay, so sustainability. So what does sustainability mean to us as a museum? Well, we're sort of struggling to define what sustainability means. So we had the baseline carbon audit back in 2018-19. Then one of the recommendations was that they had a full-time resource to take care of sustainability and carbon. That's where I came into the museum. But we're still trying to define it. We're still working towards a goal. We know we're going towards net zero, but we want to do other things as well. Sustainability is a bit more than climate change. It's biodiversity, it's waste, it's communication, all things as well. So part of my work is over the next year, we're going to try and develop a sustainability framework, which will be aligned to the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals that Ollie mentioned yesterday. But we're going to concentrate primarily on the environmental goals, because that's what we can do. There's other ones like, poverty and hunger and inequality. Those are much bigger issues, but maybe that's some of what touches museums in terms of accessibility and things like that. And I wish to be charged for food and cafe and stuff like that, but that's maybe much bigger programme for the longer term, but at the minute it's going to be on environmental sustainability. So we realise that protecting the environment and promotion of sustainable living are the environmental challenges facing global society today. This is not just a problem that affects Northern Ireland or England or Europe. It's global. It affects everyone, and some more than others. So climate change affects us maybe a little bit, but maybe somewhere like Marshall Islands, it's much more profound. So we've got a duty to try and see what we can do to minimise it. And as a museum, we're dedicated to leading by example. So we like to set ourselves up as being a local leader, nationally and internationally. That's quite a challenge, but we want to be out there. We want to try and share our experience. We want to try and learn from others. We want to be at the forefront of sustainability in terms of museums and maybe even inspire other sectors as well. And also as well as trusted institution, we've got visitors coming in, so we've got a good opportunity to educate our visitors in more sustainable ways of living and practices. So into the Ulster Folk Museum. So a little bit of background. It was established by the Ulster Folk Museum Act in 1958. And it was created to preserve a rural way of life that was in danger of disappearing due to increasing urbanisation and industrialisation. And Professor in Queens, E.F. Nevins, he was Professor Doctor in Queens. He did a lot of work around the moors. He's a Welshman. And he did a lot of work in the moors in called Moor Country, which has been reprinted several times. It's a very respected book. And he was going around documenting this and realised that something needed to be done to try and preserve it. So whenever this established the Folk Museum, they went around and they looked at various houses, and some of the houses were relocated to the Folk Museum, but even in other areas as well, even some of the townlands. And they recorded a lot of oral histories, and they recorded a lot of stuff in notebooks. So they looked at how the farms were operated, the practices they employed, the way they managed the livestock, the way they plowed the land, the sort of rotation, and various things like that. So there's a vast archive of stuff in our archives. Probably a lot of that hasn't been catalogued, it probably hasn't been documented, but there's a good resource there. So that's why the museum was established. And we have a licensed pub on the premises. So that's the Custer's pub. The front of the pub is a replica from a pub that was demolished in Armagh. But the interior of the pub is an interior from a pub somewhere else in Providence. So you've got a license, so it gives a bit of, it's we have visitor guides and first character visitor guides, so they give the stories of the characters who lived in these places and worked in these places. And everybody likes a little drink after a hard day's slog around the Folk Museum walking. We have a 55-hectare site for 136 acres between Belfast and Bangor, so it's quite a large site. It's in the middle of a huge urban area, so it's the outskirts of Belfast between Hollywood and Bangor. And it's a bit of tranquility in an otherwise very urban area. It's also a very affluent area as well. So that means that we have difficulties engaging with the local community because people who live in the pensions nearby don't really necessarily want to get their hands dirty and get involved with things like the Folk Museum. They probably don't visit it. But that's a challenge where we come to funding for things like the lottery and stuff as well. So the museum site was acquired in 1961 and 1964. So the state where the museum is based has been in the state since 1600. So there's a family called the Candy family. I don't know if there's any connection to the Candys of America fame, but they have built a manor house there in 1909. And the Control Helpline is one of those motorsports events in the world where it's basically a big steel electrics track. And we have an event there in June where cars race and sponsored by Porsche. It's challenges as well in terms of sustainability, in terms of the petrol and cars and the messaging. But yeah. So it's been, it's been relatively undisturbed for quite a number of years. There's also a Syrian on site, so that's a pre-Christian burial chamber or dwelling. So it dates back maybe to 4 AD, so 4 BC, sorry. And it's interesting, so there's been a long history of settlement on site. And this is the first thing we have, so that's Hushkid Hill Farm. So the farms are relocated and sort of they try to replicate the townlands in the rim in terms of the planting rim, in terms of the orchards, the sort of livestock, the crops that were grown, and then the gardens as well. So they're all well spaced out. So I'm not quite sure how many exhibit buildings we have, but all the buildings in the rural museum are all relocated buildings in the town. Some of them are replica buildings, and some of them are relocated. But in the town, they've done such a good job that it's difficult to tell which is which. but I think all the interiors are all relocated. So we've got the late 19th century town, which is Ballyclaraw, and the museum. Okay, so on the museum we've got a farm. So the farm is a great home for families, for kids, and we've got various animals there. So we have a number of rare breeds. So we've got Irish wild cattle. So Irish wild cattle are very sort of docile breed cattle. They've been around for a long time. There's a very small number of them in the island of Ireland. So they graze away nice and happily, and it's nice to see. So that's the bull basking in the sun, and cows around, and have some calves there recently. We've got more black-tailed and Galway sheep. So the more black-tailed sheep would be a breed that's specific to the moorlands in the south of Ulster. And there's Galway sheep, I'm not quite sure why they're in the museum, because they would come from the west of Ireland, but maybe they're a hardy breed, and that's why they're originally bred in Ulster. I'm not quite sure what the history is there. We also got pigs and poultry, but at the moment poultry is all indoors because of bird flu, and they can't be outside. So some areas of the museum where people have difficulties going around because the geese don't let them pass. Geese are very effective guard dogs. And there's one goose called Gus, and he's got a broken leg, which they have repaired with a makeshift splint, and he hobbles along, but he's got a good life. And there's the pigs and the piglets, so a number of piglets. But I think we need to look at the farm, look at the sustainability of the farm, evaluate. It is relatively low input. So the manure that's generated from the farm is put back into the farm. We don't use any chemical fertilizers. There's minimal amount of animal feed because animals take feed during the year, but it's basically mostly straw. But we need to evaluate the sustainability of it. So there's a carbon calculator for farms. So that probably doesn't come into our overall figures, but that's sometime in the future. We need to look and see, exactly what is the input of it. So they use traditional methods in the farm. So they would use horse ploughs relatively recently. So with two Clydesdales in the farm, but unfortunately one of them died. So Paddy passed away, but Paddy was about 30 years old. But the horses now they're too old to do the ploughing anymore. And the farm manager, he's been there for 45 years. He obviously isn't as fit as he used to be, so there's difficulties there as well. But even on Ferguson Tractor Day, we have some ploughing as well. So we try to do minimal input as much as we can. We have field rotation, so we grow potatoes, we grow flax, we grow oats, demonstrate, and then we move that around grass. So we do that on a regular rotation to give visitors a feel of what have been going on farms in the past. And very much focus on Irish farming methods and techniques. So things like they put piles of manure in the field with wheelbarrows, and then they go and spread it with pitchfork or whatever. Or occasionally, that's with 3 farm hands. It's a bit difficult to do that. So sometimes you have to intervene and put it in a mechanical spreader. But whenever the visitors are there during the Tuesday to Monday, Sunday, they don't see that. So it's primarily traditional methods. And also there's a connection in the past. So last year there was a Neolithic tomb which had been dismantled in the 1950s. And it was taken to the Ulster Museum. It was on the quarry face. So the museum had come along and surveyed it. Then they relocated the Ulster Museum and sat alongside the Ulster Museum for almost 50 years before the redevelopment of the Ulster Museum. And it was used for archaeology students to try and get some practice, so they can go and excavate it and then soil back on it. And it was quite good, it was quite a safe environment for them to do that. But our head of collection care, he came in post a number of years ago, and he was up around the stores and he saw a pile of stones and numbers on them. He said, "What's this?" And said, "What's the name?" Report to him. So last year the decision was taken to relocate it and put it into the Ulster Folk Museum. So we reconstructed the court tomb there, and there's a nice connection with the past there showing Neolithic farming. And so there's probably a little bit of work to do in that in terms of interpretation and get people engaged in it. So a lot of people don't really understand what it is, just say it's pile of stones at the moment. But there is access to it, and it's quite good. Okay. Fires. So within the Folk Museum, we have a lot of fires, a lot of buildings, and we have collections in it. So we have ceramics, we have textiles, we have quilts, we have table covers, all sorts of things, some clothes. And so the buildings are sort of constructed. They don't have cavity wall insulation, they don't have reinforcing, don't have insulation. So during the day, the visitor guests like fires from 10 o'clock in the morning to 4 or 5 o'clock, and they're designed to try and provide better buildings and try and preserve the collection that's there. But with the smoke as well, the smoke helps keep away pests, and it provides a bit of atmosphere as well, because that's what people go back when my great granny had a cottage like that, and it was a smoky environment. Some of the places are better than others because they have a better draft. But I don't know that's because where they were relocated, the chimneys were reconstructed in a slightly different way and by a slightly different orientation. So some challenges. But from my point of view, the main challenge is in what the fires contain. So we burn peat. So peat is a very valuable resource in terms of carbon. There's lots of carbon contained in peat. It's rich in biodiversity. There's peat bogs all over Ireland. It's a very rare resource. Peat bog can absorb an awful lot of carbon. And also around the folk park, we're lucky enough to have peat bog, and we're trying to develop a project trying to evaluate it a little bit, understand it, and try and see if we can use it to teach people about biodiversity and the environment and importance of carbon sequestration. And we're trying to develop that, but we burn peat because it's creators say that's the way it was done in buildings in the past. But whenever you look at the peat, a ton of peat is equivalent to 1.8 tons of CO2, so it's quite carbon intensive. And isn't sending out the right messages in terms of biodiversity and protecting the environment that we're burning peat. So we're looking at alternatives. So what I'm proposing to do is take some peat sods and take them to the University of Ulster and Queen's University and get them analysed. So we get some up to date data that's one tolerance value peat, and then do a comparing from other fuels and say, what's better in terms of the environment, etc. So that's one of the cottages there. So that's a really good cottage from Mana, Adrian. And that's the peat fire burning. So these fires burn all day long, and they provide a minimal amount of heat, but it's for some contribution heating, but it's not really that effective because maybe it's contained to one room, it doesn't do the whole house. And as you notice from the roof of the cottage there, we have a lot of problem with that, just need to increase more frequently because it's getting wet, it isn't drying out, and it's problematic. So we need to look at that, how we intervene with that. But I think there's talk maybe about in our department they mentioned about having electric fires to try and provide some conservation heat and provide some atmosphere and the diffusers to create peat smell. But the difficulty with electric fires is some of these sites don't have electric, so they're out in the rural area, and to bring electric to them would cost quite a bit of money, and whether it's have the benefits of it. But in terms of carbon, it does look like we should need to move away from peat and consider alternatives. So whenever you look at a ton of wood, it reduces a small amount, 40 kilos of CO2 for 1 ton of wood. So like wood, as it seems to be a no-brainer. So we get wood from sustainable forests, kind of dry forests, should be much better. But we need to sort of get that information and present that to curators and say, well, there's an alternative and caloric value is similar, but in terms of the carbon, there is much better benefit. We also have coal. But we have a relatively small amount of coal, so 1 ton of coal is equivalent to 2.9 tons of CO2. But we have 2 forges on Ulster Folk Park, the Folk Museum, and 1 forge in the Ulster American Folk Park in AIMA. But the coal is used for the blacksmiths, so they need to heat up the metal to hammer it out to make it pliable. But there isn't really an alternative to that. We can maybe use gas or maybe hydrogen, but then for historic buildings, then you can't have big tanks outside, it doesn't look right, so there's a difficulty there. So we use a relatively small amount of coal, so it's not really an issue. The issue is with peat. And that's our blacksmith there hammering out some implements, and those out there are for sale in the shop. So you go to the shop and you buy a poker, you buy a horseshoe, and you buy various tools or the forge. Okay, hedgerows. Throughout the Folk Museum, we have a lot of hedgerows, so the fields are divided up into fields and hedgerows. Traditionally, those hedges were been managed by flail, so that's a tractor going along with a huge mechanical attachment and goes along, and it's a nice straight line. But those you wouldn't have that in the 1800s, you wouldn't have that in the 1900s. There's post-war fencing as well, so we're trying to see if we can do something to try and bring more nature-friendly hedgerows into the museum. So it's mainly hawthorn or white thorn hedges throughout the museum. And so that's the sort of hedge you find throughout Ireland, a traditional hedge. And we're trying to find evidence of when hedges were planted. So we found some evidence going back to the plantation. or if you think the plantation was a lot of English settlers, so English settlers would have brought hedges across from England, that's what they would have been used to. So there must have been hedges, and livestock was valuable, so farmers would have had to close the field somehow or other, and the livestock escaping or someone entering fields to remove their prized cow or sheep or goat, wherever it might have been. So that's what the hedges are like. So it's a very rural field museum. Some of the hedges are very well grown. Some of the hedges have been managed quite substantially over the years, but we need to do a little bit of work on that. And you see that's some of the field boundaries. And you see there in the middle of the hedge, there's like a line, so that's where the flail is. So it just produces this line, which the hedge gets all knotted and all towards the nests. It's not very good for cyber. Then you see most of the groups on top of the hedge or on the bottom of the hedge. Whereas that hedge is laid, it'd be much more consistent and better for birds and other wildlife. And there was some hedge laying done in the museum a number of years ago. There was a ploughing demonstration, and they did some hedge laying in a small section. So we're working towards that. And around some of the exhibit buildings, there's some hedging as well, which is more formal, and that probably needs to be retained as more formal. But in the rural area, there is potential for hedge laying for training and demonstration. So yeah, so it's been managed traditionally by manual flail, and that causes problems because you have big machines and they're dangerous machines as well. You have debris all over the road as well. It sometimes can look very brutal. So just try to continue with that. So we're just trying to work on different methods that are better for aesthetic and biodiversity. So we're trying to do the two at the same time. So hedge laying is a way that is sort of considered to be very beneficial to wildlife and for the longevity of the hedges. But it's not a common activity in the island of Ireland. There is an association, the Hedgerow Association of Ireland, and they try to promote hedge laying. So there's a small number of members, they have something like 70 members, and maybe a small number of practitioners. But they're trying to promote it and trying to get it more sort of mainstream. They're running local championships across the island, in which I participated in one or two. And I won the prize for regrowth in the 2021 competition. That's regrowth. So I think I know what I'm doing. There's no hedge laying tools of infection. So the career said there's no sign of it. So it may be that the farmer used a mix or a side or whatever, some sharp implement from the house. But so we're trying to figure out what may have used, what we think is something. Also, as well, we're trying to find is there an Irish word or an Ulster Scots word for the activity. There's bound to be something, there's bound to be some documentation, so we're working on that at the moment. And we've got some evidence from Plantation Ulster, which is useful, and some evidence from the 1800s. And this year we're hoping to develop a partnership with Hedgerows Ireland, prove a concept. So we'll maybe try 10, 15 metres to show that it can work. And then we try and see if we can do a training and education opportunity. So we've got conservation volunteers who are based on our site, they're partners in the site, they run the native tree nursery. So we can work with Hedgerows Ireland and conservation volunteers to bring people in to try and see manage that more effectively. Okay. So this year we developed an ecological management plan for Ulster Folk Museum. And that was for the Folk and Transport Museum because they're adjacent sites and it just made sense to do it all in one. So this came about last year. We're too excited have done a walk with one of our teams from CIDR. So CIDR is the Centre for Environmental Data and Reporting, and they record species across the province. So if somebody sees a dead fox, they give them where it is, and they record the coordinates. It goes into the database and they can track movement of mammals and other things as well. And so they did a talk last year, walking around the woodland with Chief Executive, and she was very excited. And she says, "Yeah, we need to do a plan to try and get everybody on the same page and try to move this forward." So that's what we did. So we became a signatory to the All Pollinator Plan in June 21. So that's just before I arrived. And biodiversity, which even talked about in the museum, going back to maybe the early 2000s, but nothing had happened because they didn't have the resources. People had all their jobs, they were busy. So whenever I came along, I said, right, okay, we're going to try and do something about it. So we got conservation orders. We decided not to cut the grass on the sites. We got the place go wild, showed potential. So people haven't seen the place in that way for a number of years. So it was moving away from manicured lawns to something that's a bit wilder, one that's better for biodiversity. Some people like it, some people didn't like it, but that's what it. So in spring 2023, we started implementation of actions such as No Mow May and then in June. So we had some positive feedback. So some people said, yeah, it's great. We had photographs of couples with the monitor in the background and the meadow saying it's great, giving nature a chance. And all people said, you know, we went to the National Museum and it's all going that are closed. But the signs didn't come at the right time. The signs didn't come until after the event, so we didn't get signs until July and started doing the implementation in May. So that's what the monitor looked like. So the monitor here in the foreground, the background, and the foreground is the lawn. But that lawn was manicured when it was life for 50 years, and nobody's ever seen it like this. And what came up was lovely flowers, and there's one orchids inside as well, so it was really nice. Last year we had implementation problems. I was driving in one morning and saw the meadow one looked really nice, and I thought, right, I'll get a photograph on the way back. It was running late for a meeting, as you do. And whenever I came back, it was all gone, and nobody took responsibility for it. So that's why we developed the ecological management plan, so everybody understands the areas that are zoned, what can be done, what can't be done, where permissions are required, where permissions aren't required. So we worked on the plan, so that was all teams across the museum, various people, various stakeholders. It was all internal, trying to get that up and running. So yeah, so that's just been signed off now, and this is what it's like. So we've got short flowering meadows, long flowering meadows, maintained all year, and then around buildings. So we've mapped it out so it's quite clear, so the groundsmen can see it in the office. We go out, put it at the lawnmower, they know exactly where they have to go and what they can do and what they can't do. So that's been, so hopefully we'll be sure that in the distant future whenever it's tidied up and got some design on. Okay, so a connection with the past. The museum is very much connected with Harry Ferguson. So Harry Ferguson was one of the first people who invented the tractor and probably invented the modern tractor. But the tractor, he was very big in the tractor world. So he invented the tractor and modernized it in mass production of tractors and also with 3-point linkage, which is still in use today. So the museum last year was very privileged to acquire the Ferguson Black. So the Ferguson Black was the prototype tractor of all the Ferguson tractors. So the museum acquired that last year. I'm not sure whether we actually own it or whether it's known from the Ferguson family. But this is a big thing. So this is the Mona Lisa of tractors. So it's a very, very important part of the collection. So it's a big draw for performers. So that's in the Transport Museum. And they have a Ferguson Heritage Day every year. So it gets lots of people in. So the Harry Ferguson Memorial Band, Pipe Band comes in. And they bring in all the Ferguson tractors. There's a huge thing. So people collect Ferguson tractors, they restore them, they bring them to rallies. There's a big thing, so big numbers come to the museum. There's big family events. They drive through all the narrow streets and laneways of the museum. They do some ploughing. You know, as you can see, it's usually good weather, and you know, they're really into it. So, and leading into that, so yeah, so the Ferguson is a connection with the past. So we try to link up all the different museums, or got the transport connection with the Folk Museum, vice versa, elsewhere, and Ulster Museum. And but part of the Folk Museum, half of the site isn't really accessible to the public, so it's got a woodland. So it's a long established woodland. I'm working with the Woodland Trust for a number of years, and they identified that we have remnants of ancient woodland, and they said we can help you restore that. So they have us find a contractor, some funding for it, and that's been a very big project, very visible. And the long-term goal is to re-establish the walkways that have been found in the woodland, to try and encourage people to walk through it and see what's there. So that's what we're moving away from cultural heritage are based in Tetra, that's why they exist, but also as well got a huge environmental resources doorstep as well, which we can use and utilize. So hopefully we'll have a short video here. Yeah, so the long established woodland was, this is what it was like last year, the year before. It was wall to wall laurel and small amount of rhododendron. It was choking the life out of the woodland. The woodland wasn't very healthy. So we removed that. So we put up signage around the estate, try and give visitors an idea of what was going on, so we try and inform them. It was quite a dramatic change. People hadn't seen it in that condition for a long, long time. And then whenever we finished phase 3 there at the end of February, we planted some trees. So we planted 500 trees with the conservation volunteers and the Woodland Trust. So the conservation volunteers planted 100 trees on International Forestry Day the 21st of March, and then the Woodland Trust planted another 400 the week after. But we're planting in areas where the canopy is not very good, trying to fill in gaps, trying to have it, but we're going to try and take the opportunity to do some regeneration if we can. Because our botanists say, well, if we don't do it now, we won't know what it's like. We should give it a chance to see what comes up. So there might be a significant seed bed there, which we should try and utilise if we can. So it's a lot more open. There's things like bluebells and wood anemones and celandine and other plants emerging. But the woodland is, as you can see there in the pictures, the trees are all of a similar height, similar age. So we're trying to create a bit more diversity in terms of canopy structure and age structure. So we may need a little bit of help. But the Woodland Trust said this will be a project which will be 50, maybe to even 100 years. So it's long-term investment. So yeah, so that gives you a sense of what it's like. Okay, so hopefully now I'll have a little video. This works.
Maybe if you use the mouse on me. And then, yeah, if you go down to the little triangle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that gives you a sense of the work involved. Obviously, I was speaking up, so I was over one day, but quite a lot of activity with the contractor and really quite busy. So yeah, so that costs us about £100,000 the current phase. So yes, it's been a big investment. So for the longer term, hopefully we'll gain a lot in many ways. Okay, so one of the things is very important is trying to get recognition, not only internally but also externally. Because whenever you're talking to the SLT or the exec team, they like a bit of recognition, they like a pat on the back. And so it's been important that we're involved in awards, but you spent a lot of time chasing awards. So we've been very selective in the awards that we have gone for. We've gone for maybe more local awards, maybe more Northern Ireland awards rather than national awards or even awards in any environment. Just trying to make it manageable. A big thing was green tourism. So we've got a green tourism award for all our sites. So we've got 3 bronzes and 1 silver. And the green tourism is loosely based on FDGs. But we started in the green tourism journey with support of Visit Belfast. So that's the council body that promotes tourism within the Greater Belfast area. And they had done a global index a number of years ago with tourism, participated in it. I think it's GRI, but Belfast pictured very clearly on, so it was 86th in the world. And went to council, and council said we need to do something about it. So they got all the tourism business involved in it, hotels, bed and breakfasts, museums, all the arts venues. They said go for green tourism. So they are now in the top 10% in the world. It was a big achievement. So that's how we got into the green tourism journey. There's a fair amount of work involved in green tourism. The first one was okay, I picked it up and I added some things into it. The subsequent ones, a lot of corporate, so it was easy to pick it up and go along. But even so, you have to go and get photographs, you have to get photographs of all the various buildings, the turrets, great shops, all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But it's quite a lot of information to gather up. But once you've gone through the process, you have an idea. It still takes time to do it. Last year we entered the Responsible Business Awards, so those are run by Business Community. So we entered the Nature and Biodiversity category. Last year that was the first time that award was available. So we were finalists from that. We're up against some serious competition. We're up against some big manufacturers, we're up against TransLink, public sector, public transport company. But to get there as finalist was a good achievement. So this year we put in again. So that was for our woodland and meadow work last year. This year we put in just the woodland because I think we cleared 20 hectares of woodland and tried to restore it last price again. So I think we've got a reasonable chance, so we'll see. And then also about trying to demonstrate equipment as well. So people say, well, I'm pretty serious about this. So one of the first things I did whenever I joined was try and join up for different things. So the first thing I signed up to was Pledge Net Zero. So Pledge Net Zero is aligned to the United Nations Race to Net Zero. So Pledge Net Zero is a UK-based thing. It's primarily for environmental services, but there are a number of museums in it, so like Q's in it and some other museums. And so there's about 160 participants in it. And you basically send us a report each year with your carbon emissions, and then you're supposed to do a peer piece to actually give another peer on carbon reduction. And so we've been taking part in that for over a year as well. Aligned to that as well is the Northern Ireland Climate Action Pledge. So that's something similar. So we make a report in every year, and then what they do is they try and back in what organisations are doing to the problems in terms of carbon and trying to manage it. Business community Northern Ireland have been around for 25 years, an environmental benchmark survey. So initially that was the top 100 companies in Northern Ireland, but it widened out to any company or to anybody in the public sector. So there's a small number of public sector participants in it. So we took part in 23 for the first time again last year. And it's basically things like your commitment to the environment, to sustainability, to biodiversity, to waste management, to water management, etc. And then you put you in different bands. So there's bronze, there's silver, there's gold, and then it's platinum. If you achieve platinum, you're doing very well. So we think we know quite well to achieve silver. And the first year we got a gap analysis to try and see if we could improve it. But it wasn't a lot we could do because we didn't have the resources to go for the next highs of 14,001 and other things because we're such a spread out organisation. So, and also it's very important for partnerships. So partnerships are critical because people build things, they share expertise, they help you along, and you learn a lot from them. So we're part of the National Museum Ecology Subgroup. So I participated in the Scope 3 working group for the Climate Cup, which was held in the Tate Water in October 23. And I went by ferry and train there, and she was out of the flew. And I worked out the carbon emissions, and it was quite a difference. So I arrived a little bit late, but it was a good talking point, and they were still talking about it. So, that was a big challenge. So the museums, that was the first time they all got together with two sustainability professionals to discuss the environment and what they should do and what they should do in terms of decarbonisation and climate. So yeah, there were not participants in that. We signed up for Fit for the Future, which is a coalition of organisations working together on decarbonisation. So there's a number of museums take part in that. There's councils, there's charities, and that's quite useful. And they do regular webinars, and there's sharing information, and you can ask questions, if you're stuck on various things, and you can avail that expertise. We try and work very closely with local councils in the areas we operate. So local councils have done lots of things, and they work very closely with communities. They've done things with parks, and they've done other things. They can maybe open doors that we wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So we try to work very closely with them. We work very closely with Tourism Northern Ireland and West Belfast because we don't see ourselves as a tourist attraction. We see ourselves as a cultural heritage attraction, but we still need the tourist promotion. We need people to be aware that we're there, so they come through our doors and try and sustain us. We work very closely with the local university. So Queen's University, until recently, it was more on the operational side of things. So the States team, and the same with Ulster University. But recently we've also got students in. So we've got two MSc students in Queen's at the moment doing a work placement on climate adaptation. And we're going to get two students in during the summer, two undergraduate students to come to us for a year for replacement, work experience. So that's good, and that helps a lot to alleviate some of the pressures. We also work very closely with professional bodies. So we work with the Irish Museums Association, and occasionally we have professional bodies that will ask us if they would come see behind the scenes museum. So like the Engineering Ireland came for a visit, and this year environmental management assessment. So that's good that professional bodies are reaching out to us and wanting to learn from our expertise and can share things with them. We can learn a lot from them as well. And then on site, We've got a partnership with the Woodland Trust, who helps with the woodland restoration and also the conservation volunteers. The conservation volunteers a number of years ago, they've been a site that they were on for maybe 40, 50 years, and they needed a new home. And we offered them a new home, and they've established a tree nursery on the site. They all run a green gym, they do volunteering opportunities, but there's also volunteering opportunities at the museum itself as well. So we run our own volunteering program. So people can come out with things like the Ferguson Heritage Day, they can help with car parking or guide people around the site. Various things. So volunteering is a big part of our operation. And also with central government. So we are an arm's length body of the Department of Communities. So I work very closely with the department on their climate change committee, and we meet once a month and we input to that. And we're putting the Northern Ireland Climate Action Plan. And then also as well as the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Affairs, because we're going to do the reporting later in the year. And we've been working on developing the co-design of the template for the reporting. Okay. Just to finish up, I'm going to show a little video here now at Tourism in Ireland first, which will give a bit of a flavour of the folk museum and what activities go on there.
I'm Helen Conley. I'm the Volunteer and Participation Manager for National Museum of Ireland. We have a renewed focus on creating this space as a space where communities can come to get their hands mucky, learn about the really rich ecology on our site.
I'm Adrian, Fitzpatrick, Sustainability Manager, National Museums Northern Ireland. We want to re-establish an important habitat in Northern Ireland. The ancient woodland has been in existence since 1600. So we're removing the rhododendron and cherry laurel from the site, and we hope by removing these species that habitat will thrive again.
Part of the visitor journey on our site means people can come and see our makers and our artisans in their spaces, and those are all things that then we are able to sell in our shop, so people can take a wee bit of that piece of history home with them. The type of activities that people are able to come and get involved in now are things like growing native trees from seed to sapling, creating willow walkways with the willows that's grown here on our site, and also growing heritage fruit and vegetables and learning about that as a sustainable practice that they can then bring back into their homes. In the last 3 years, we've embarked on an on-site partnership with the conservation volunteers.
The conservation volunteers run a partnership with the National Museum at the site in Control. They have a tree nursery, they have a green gym. But the impact of the tree nursery is that we can grow trees that are sourced locally from native seeds, local provenance, local genetics. We have a couple of solid fields, and those solid fields we grow willow, which is native to the province and the area. The willow products that are made by our master craftsman, those are produced and then they're put out for sale in our shop. Sustainability mission for British PPS have been to go for the Green Tourism Award. We have begun to measure our carbon footprint over the last number of years, and we're committed to 50% reduction in our carbon and indirect emissions by 2030. We do believe it's financially worthwhile to invest in sustainability and carbon reduction.
For other organisations that are just at the beginning of their sustainable journey, you don't have to be the expert in this field. Working with partnerships has been an amazing way for us to unlock the potential of this site in terms of talking about sustainability and climate change. Our relationship with the conservation volunteers has been a really good example of that.
Okay, so I guess you'll never go to the museum for visitors. Okay.